There's quite a bit of members of the Kong family. Ones that have impacted the gaming industry in incredible ways, and ones that have only gotten the chance to appear once in a title before essentially being left behind and forgotten by the masses. But we haven't forgot about you guys, right everyone? In honor of the month of December being known as Donkey Kong Month, thanks Donkey, it'd be the most fitting if the last video on Ouijaman for the month of December and for the year of 2022 was on everyone's favorite clan of apes. So today we're going to be ranking every member of the Donkey Kong family, from weakest to strongest. But I'm using the phrase every member somewhat loosely here, due to the fact that not every single Kong across the franchise can be played or even has feats of strength during cutscenes and things of that nature. So I'm sorry to all you wrinkly and swanky Kong fans, but characters like them just aren't going to be on here. One last thing before I get into the weakest member, don't be a stranger to hitting that subscribe button with the notifications turned on for more Nintendo related gaming content like this in the future. We're super close to 3K subs, and part of me is still huffing some hopium that we might hit it before 2023. Coming in at the weakest is Manky Kong. Yeah, the Frankenstein looking orangutan that only appeared in the first Donkey Kong Country game. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, the biggest reason he's even on here is because I wanted there to be a well-rounded number for this list, and putting him on here makes it 12. Not a whole lot to say about this guy though. These groups of Kongs were essentially exiled from the Kong family due to how savage they acted, which really only consisted of throwing barrels at, Diddy or DK. They only stood in one place as well, which is kind of uncommon to begin with when it comes to DKC enemies. They usually move even just a little bit. Plus they aren't even tanky enough to survive a jump attack from Diddy, which several enemies in DKC are capable of, one of which being the damn army enemies that are noticeably smaller than the Manky at that. I think the bottom of the list is more than fitting for these bad boys. The number 11 spot goes to Donkey Kong Jr., aka Cranky's son and the father of DK we know and love. Not much to say about this one either, since he's only had one game where he simply just jumps and climbs, and his spin-off appearances have done next to nothing when it comes to showing off his physical capabilities. But since he was able to save his father in Donkey Kong Jr., I have to at least put him above the likes of Manky Kong. Next up are the Kong bosses from Donkey Kong Jungle Beat: Dread Kong, Karate Kong, Ninja Kong, Sumo Kong, and the Ghastly King in that order. I'm more or less having these guys all around the same place because they all scale pretty similarly to each other with how their boss fights work in this game. That being, they just do a few attacks in a row on DK where DK either has to dodge or counter before he can actually start doing damage to them. With the further you get in the game, the more you'll have to dodge or counter before you can do anything. Hence why I gave Ghastly King at the top and Dread at the bottom, since the amount of attacks that are done differ. Initially, I wasn't even going to include these guys since they only appear in a very niche spin-off title in DK, but because they are the only bosses in the entire franchise to have Kong in their names, I would have felt bad if I pretended they just didn't exist for the sake of this video. Well, technically Ghastly King doesn't have the word Kong in it in English, but his Japanese name translates to Final Kong, so there's that. Following the Kong bosses is Tiny Kong, Dixie's younger sister who debuted in Donkey Kong 64 and was also playable in Mario Super Sluggers and DK Barrel Blast. She is capable of twirling her hair in the exact same way as Dixie, gaining both height and a slower descent time when used. Tiny can also shrink down to microscopic size with the use of special barrels to enter small places or render enemies confused. Tiny even has her own special weapon, a feather bow. Although it has small ammo amounts, she still has a weapon regardless, just like all the other Kongs that are playable in that game. The shrinking ability in particular is cool and all, but isn't going to give Tiny that much of an edge in a fight to the death. Now for Kiddy Kong, Dixie and Tiny's younger cousin, as well as Chunky Kong's younger brother, who only appeared in Donkey Kong Country 3 for the SNES and its GBA remake. Although only 3 years old, this baby ape packs a wallop. In terms of brute force, Kiddy scales to almost the same as Donkey Kong himself, I think, being able to take out certain enemies like Crumples with a mere jump, while Dixie would need to use a barrel if she was alone, or throw Dixie Kong into the air with just mainly the strength of one arm. He can be argued to scale to around the same as Baron K. Rulenstein as well, a version of K. Rool that succeeded in capturing both Diddy and Donkey Kong. Granted, these are both versions of those characters that were not out their prime strength levels yet, but it's still impressive nonetheless. It's a shame this little baby hasn't appeared in more titles because I always liked him. The number 7 spot goes to Cranky Kong. Now, some may think this wrinkled old bastard doesn't deserve to be this high, but we gotta remember this guy was technically the original Donkey Kong in the arcade days, making him one of Mario's biggest adversaries in the past with his ginormous barrel supply that required Mario to use hammers to break through a lot of the time. For a while, players weren't even sure if he'd been capable to do anything in his old man state either. Yeah, he was good at making potions, but that was about it. That is until Tropical Freeze changed everything. This game proved Cranky Kong still has more than enough pep in his step to go on some wild adventures. Being able to run at the same speed as his grandson, use his cane to gain higher jumping distance on top of being able to kill spiked or shelled enemies with it, but I think the best use of this cane is in the water levels. Finally, those godforsaken fish can be taken out by something that isn't on guard the swordfish. It's so glad Retro Studios Studios gave him the spotlight he deserved. In the end, I'd say Cranky is around large building level, maybe small country level with all this. Following the Kong Pappy is Dixie Kong. Dixie has proven herself to be quite strong in the 3 main platformer titles she's been playable across in the Donkey Kong games. Arguably being the most practical partner to use in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze due to her copter hair giving you both extra height and distance, whereas Diddy and Cranky only give one or the other. The copter hair also had the potential to last indefinitely in both DKC2 and 3 as long as Dixie doesn't hit the ground first. However, it only gives slower descent sideways and no extra height, but because she's done both versions on screen before, I'm saying she has the potential to do both in a real brawl if she wanted to. Plus, for being such a small monkey, she's still strong enough to throw her younger cousin Kitty a decent distance or pull out waterlogged pirate ships from the center of the ocean in Tropical Freeze, since any character in that game can pull the plugs out of the ground regardless of where they're located. Tropical Freeze even gave her a pop gun ability similar to Diddy's, only it's bubblegum instead of peanuts. Overall, I think Dixie sits around small country level in terms of power. On to Lanky Kong, the one with no style, no grace, and a funny face. Originally, I was going to have Lanky Kong a bit lower on this list, but I think Lanky has the most diverse abilities out of anyone on this list besides maybe Donkey Kong himself. Lanky's long arms allow for so many wacky things like climbing up steep slopes, inflating his body like a balloon to fly short distances, and the orangutan sprint, which makes his handstands even faster, arguably making him one of the fastest Kongs in the Kong family besides Diddy. Plus, he's the only Kong in the game besides DK himself that can transform into one of the animal buddies, that being On Guard. Yeah, maybe not the craziest physically, but I think his previous mentioned abilities at least put him above everyone else I've mentioned so far, even if just a tad bit. For the last of the DK64 bunch is Chunky Kong. No, he's not dead. He's alive. And Chunky's been stated by multiple official sources to be the strongest Kong at the time besides Donkey Kong himself, the official German website for the game outright saying, although Chunky is still young in years, he is nevertheless almost as strong as Donkey. So for those who might think Chunky needs to be number 1, sorry, it's just not a thing. His strength mostly speaks for itself, to be honest. His punching ability has enough power behind it to break down doors amongst other things. He can turn invisible under certain conditions as well as use his Hunky Chunky ability to grow to giant size, which is mainly used for picking up larger objects or climbing trees whose bodies are too wide to climb normally. Similarly to the other playable Kongs in this game, he can use an instrument to defeat almost any enemy on screen if used, this instrument being the triangle. Normal Chunky is probably around country level, but the Hunky Chunky mode could put him higher in theory. The number 3 spot is gonna go to Funky Kong. I promise I'm not putting him this high just because of the Flame Runner combo from Mario Kart Wii, you gotta believe me. Well, maybe just a little. Funky Kong was always such an interesting case because with the exception of spin-offs, people never really got to play him in a game where his skills would truly be put on display. That is until the Switch port of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze came along and its brand new Funky Kong mode. God, I love this game. Funky proved himself to be almost on par with DK in terms of strength, showing what he could do in levels. He could double jump, glide on a surfboard for both height and distance, jump on spiked enemies, roll indefinitely, and breathe underwater. Yeah, he's breathing underwater. There is no air tank behind that dollar store snorkel set. And of course, gaining the other standard abilities the Kongs have in this game, like the hand slam or being able to pull plugs from out of the ground to reveal secrets. Funky only appeared briefly in DK64, but was the one responsible for knocking K. Rool through the ceiling of his arena, potentially having Funky at around country level when it comes to his attacking power, and probably at country level as a whole, to be honest, since he can take more hits than the average Kong against foes like Lord Frederick, having 5 hard points and all, on top of being one of the more intelligent members of the Kong family due to his knowledge about machinery, like creating the Funky Flights barrels or all the upgraded modes of transportation in Donkey Kong Country 3. Number 2 goes to Diddy Kong. Don't let his small size fool you, he definitely deserves to be this high. Just like his jacked brethren in the Kong family, Diddy Kong also has small country level attack power, most notably shown at the end of Donkey Kong Country Returns when he or Donkey have the potential to knock a smaller version of the moon out of orbit into Earth's atmosphere to land on the volcano. In Diddy's case, this can also make a good argument for his durability too, since he landed on this moon head first rather than punching it, yet didn't have any serious head injuries afterwards. His notable abilities come from his rocket barrel and peanut pop gun, which help him increase his range and speed even more. Not like he really even needs the speed boost anyway, since his base speed is already hypersonic level, being on par, if not faster than Dixie, who was shown to be capable of dodging consecutive strikes of lightning in Donkey Kong Country 3. But their comparable physical strength and Diddy's overwhelming speed with the rocket barrel backpack especially gives him the ever so slight edge over Funky in my eyes. To nobody's surprise, the number 1 spot goes to Donkey Kong. Essentially capable capable of doing what most of the Kongs on this list can do and then some, due to being more physically fit in terms of lifting strength than someone like Mario. His attack power is already at country and or galaxy level. The Mario Strikers games have shown he's capable of summoning electricity to strengthen his attacks, although exclusive to the Smash Bros games, he can spin around like a helicopter to gain extra height and distance. If someone gets too close, they'll take damage as well. His giant punch in those games being known to break shields easily if charged up all the way, or can just kill somebody at like 50. Although not as fast as Diddy, he's still extremely fast, even able to catch fire during certain Donkey Kong Jungle Beat boss fights. And like I said earlier, sharing the same small moon feat as Diddy, but using his fist to knock it out of orbit instead, only having his hand slightly bruised for a short period of time. Clearly, the injury wasn't that severe if he felt like he needed to just blow on it a few times. And the only Kong that's worthy of the Strong Kong ability in Donkey Kong 64, which essentially gives DK the same immunity the Superstar gives Mario in his games. And if you watch the first video on this channel about the Mario power-ups, you know how I feel about the Superstar in terms of power. It's insane. There's tons more things that I could add here when it comes to DK and probably the rest of the Kong family, but I think I've made my points. DK is the strongest member of the Kong family, Manky's the weakest, and I don't think anybody will disagree with that. I am curious what you guys think about this list as a whole, though. Do you agree with the exact ordering I gave here, or do you think certain Kongs should be higher or lower than what I put them at? I would love to know your thoughts. Of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like down below. It helps out a ton. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.